Meeting to order. Oh, Erica, would you please do the pre-meeting announcements?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Partnership Grants meeting. We're using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you'd like to comment during the meeting, please type "I have a comment" or "I have a question" in the chat, and a message will be sent to the host. Alternatively, you can also use the raise hand feature. In efforts of transparency for all those joining this public meeting, whether by phone or Zoom, we request that you refrain from having side conversations on chat about the content of the meeting. Again, the chat feature is utilized simply as a tool for you to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. All Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings are recorded and posted to the State Bar website. A friendly reminder that this is a video conference, and please be aware of your surroundings behind you. If you are joining Zoom on a computer when on mute, holding down the spacebar will temporarily unmute you. If you use your phone to dial into this meeting, please be sure your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid audio feedback issues. And while joining audio via computer is highly recommended, if an individual loses audio, they can call in separately using the Zoom conference number.
Thank you. How about Crystal? Will you take roll?
Great. Vanarelli?
Here.
Bartleson? Bichelli?
Here.
Diskin?
Here.
Schreiber?
Here.
Great. So we have quorum. I'll go ahead and move on to our advisors. Judge Askell?
I'm here.
Justice Murray? I see you.
Sorry, I was muted. I am obviously here.
Great. All right. So to our liaisons, Selena Copeland, Bonnie Huff, Melanie Snyder.
I'm promoting Melanie right now, and Bonnie is on also.
Oh, great. All right, Bonnie, I'm marking you as here.
Sorry. Yes, I'm here.
All right, and then Melanie, I see you as well.
Sorry, my computer just knocked me off and made me rejoin.
No problem. Christine Ganong, Mark Tony. All right, State Bar staff, Elizabeth Hom.
Present.
Erica Carroll.
Here.
Duan Nguyen.
Here.
And then is Brady on the call? I don't believe so. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Let me share my screen for the agenda. Oops.
And while she's doing that, I don't see any, but let me just ask, are there any members of the public on the call that wish to identify themselves? Hearing none.
There's Zach Newman from LAC. He has his hand raised.
Hi, everybody. This is Zach Newman from LAC. I'm attending on behalf of LAC, and Selena couldn't make it today. I don't know if now's the right time for public comment, but we just generally wanted to convey our support of the staff recommendation that you'll be seeing in the PowerPoint today. Selena provided some feedback in an email correspondence, but I'm just here to see what happens and also just to convey again our support of the staff recommendation. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent. And as one of our liaisons, you're of course welcome to comment on any agenda item as we move through the meeting, all right? Oh, he's muted. All right. Are there any other members of the public that wish to identify themselves? Okay. Hearing none, let's move on to the consent item, which is approved meeting summary and action items from the June 18th, 2021 meeting. Are there any comments on that document? Hearing none, would somebody like to make a motion to approve them?
I will.
Who is that? Eric. Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second. This is
Okay,
Chris.
thanks, Chris. Any further discussion before we do a roll call vote? Okay, Crystal, take it away, please.
Great. Vanarelli,
Yes.
Bartleson, Vishalli,
Yes.
Biskin,
Yes.
Schreiber.
Yes.
All right, motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, discussion and action items. Crystal's going to be giving us an update.
Let me make sure my mouse is working. Great. So this was regarding the 2022 partnership grant funding recommendations. Just wanted to give a quick reminder of the timeline for the partnership grants and where we're at. Today is July 29th, and this is the meeting that we're hoping to finalize the funding recommendations. I know that there was follow-up from the June 18 meeting, specifically regarding Riverside Legal Aid. Following that meeting, staff met with Riverside Legal Aid as well as Riverside Superior Court, and they confirmed that their plan for the 2022 would entail having a paralegal as well as preparing document preparation assistance, which was a little different than what was responded, but having spoken to both Riverside Legal Aid and the Superior Court, staff is comfortable with recommending the same the tentative funding recommendations that were discussed on June 18 for the committee's consideration. Okay,
does anybody have any questions about that? That was the one outstanding project we needed to decide on, the Riverside Legal Aid, and it sounds like after staff met with them and the Superior Court that they're going to be able to provide services at the, using the allocation amount that we had decided on.
great. If there's none, here's the proposed recommendation on the screen. Subject to any changes, I think Eric emailed me an alternate language as well. I'm happy to make that edit in real time if that's easier.
Yeah,
Sure.
my comment was the last clause as finalized during the committee's July 29 meeting. It seems too vague. I mean, why don't we just specifically reference a chart that lays out exactly what the recommended funding is for the various projects, so any reader can see what we're talking about.
I forgot what that recommendation was. Was it just attachment A?
I don't know. The attachments are a little confusing to me. I actually looked through the memo. It looked like attachment A was an attachment to an attachment. So I guess I'm going to rely on you to tell me what we need to refer to.
Sure. Oh, I think Dwan has her hand raised.
I know with the other subcommittees, they just refer to as reference and attachment and then whatever it is, and we can, if you wanted to stay consistent, but just a suggestion.
Yeah, I think that would be fine as referenced in, but I just don't know what the attachment is.
Are you just going to attach it to the minutes?
I'm looking up the attachment right now.
Let me head and stop share. I'll pull up that spreadsheet.
So it's attachment B.
Can we actually just pull that out and attach it to this resolution? Just pull the chart out, call it attachment A, and just attach it to the resolution?
Yeah, we can do that. Does the committee would like to see that, or do you have access to that on your end? It's taking a little bit while to load on mine right now.
While you're loading that, can I just get some clarification? One of the concerns I think was raised was that they'd continue, but it'd be substantially degraded. But that's no longer a concern?
Correct. Yeah, so as part of their plan, they're seeking to do sort of a hybrid model, just to kind of be able to serve the same number of anticipated self-represented litigants. Also, I think they were Rita committed to seeking additional funding to supplement that the difference of what was requested and what the Partnership Grant Committee was recommending.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to save time, Chris, at least I would be willing to just say as referenced in attachment A, and I would just defer to you to pull the attachment and attach it to the resolution. I would be comfortable with that.
Okay,
Dawn has her hand raised.
Yeah, can I just, for clarity purposes, because it was attachment B for this meeting materials. So
Yeah.
I would suggest reference it as attachment B because it's already been posted. When we pull it for the commission meeting, we will turn it into attachment A. And then that's probably the cleanest.
Fine. That's fine.
Because the commission motion will
Okay with
modify
that.
it.
Just attach the list.
yeah, we will attach. We will
However.
attach the list, but it's carrying over all of the amounts discussed on May 7 and May 6 over for that 2.58574 allocation amount. Correct. Okay, so I will share the motion again on the screen for the committee's consideration. Here.
So Crystal, can you put in attachment B? Thank you.
So I'm unclear about the wording of the resolution. So resolved that the Partnership Grants Committee approve the list of 2020 partnership grant allocation, and then there seems to be a period.
There is a period there. Thank you, Judge Jasko. Allocation recommendations as referenced in attachment B.
Put the period up.
And then a period at the end.
Just move the period.
All right, thank you.
Okay, if everybody is satisfied, is there a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Chris? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Eric? Okay. Any further discussion? All right. Crystal, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Zanarelli? Yes. Bardoson? Bashelli?
Yes.
Iskin? Or Iskin?
Yes.
Schreiber? Schreiber was yes.
Yes,
as well?
I'm a yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4B of our agenda.
Sure. So this is the, I'm going to give a brief presentation on the feedback received from the 2022 partnership grant applicants. Similar to the survey that was sent to you all, we also surveyed the applicants in terms of their experience regarding the grants administration and scoring rubric. So I'm going to go over the SurveyMonkey results and the feedback received. So it was a slightly longer survey with 16 questions, and we utilized a 5-point Richter scale as well, and additional text box for some comments. In total, I think survey fatigue is real. We received responses from 6 applicants as of July 27th. So question 1 was, what's the name of your organization? So I'll move on to the larger questions with the aggregated data. Question 2 is your project currently funded? As you can see, majority of those projects who responded do have existing partnership grants. All of them, 100%, had attended the webinar in February, which is a good indication. And there was also a comment regarding the webinar being helpful as well. I think this is the question 4. This asked about the webinar and understanding the grant eligibility requirements, selection criteria, and process. As you can see in the bottom, there seemed to be it was somewhat helpful to extremely helpful for those applicants who had applied. This question 5, was specifically regarding the request for proposal. We did adjust that to include the scoring rubric as well as provide additional clarity. I think that was received positively based on these responses here. Question 6 was just regarding the scoring rubric. This was the first time, I think, for both returning and new applicants in utilizing as they were completing their application. There was a comment just regarding selection criteria and maybe providing a little bit more clarity for better understanding. But again, the latter 3, I think, is a good indication looking just across all of the responses. Question 7 was regarding the category weights, scores and weights. Another recommendation from the applicants was, potentially having a second session to go over the rubric just to get better understanding, which was a pretty good suggestion that maybe we can utilize in future grant years. Question 8 was regarding the definitions about the meets, exceeds, and below. Again, I think there was positive feedback to this, maybe room for some improvements in future iterations. Question 9 was regarding the selection criteria category descriptions. This was the breakdowns in the rubric as we described them. Again, went from somewhat helpful to extremely helpful for those respondents. Funding priorities seemed very helpful for the most part. That seemed to be the response most utilized as well. That one specifically was, I think, funding priority 1, 2, and 3 regarding providing seed funding, projects in their 2nd to 5th year, etc. Question 11 was regarding the optional innovation descriptions. This was a new category and kind of a more explicit consideration in the RFP. So it was, I think this evaluation was fair in terms of, what did innovation mean? And now that we've awarded some points for 2022, we can leverage that to hopefully provide more insight and understanding with this specific criteria. Few more questions. Number 12 was how helpful were the available applicant resources? It seemed that a lot of these respondents found them very helpful in their completion process. This was applicant resources and understanding the selection criteria, very similar to the prior question. Question 14, I think we just wanted to know, was what we provided you, was it helpful in these different phases? This one was regarding the review and the recommendation process, and majority of the respondents said very helpful. So that was great to hear. And then question 15, we did provide the total rubric scores as well as some additional information to each of the applicants towards the end of the review process. So just asking how helpful that was. It seems to be either very helpful or extremely helpful for most of the respondents.
Was that,
yes.
So was that total score or each individual, like the whole rubric sheet?
It was the total score.
Okay,
the end, yeah. And then question 16, these are just some comments straight from, pulled from the from SurveyMonkey. I think so. I talked about, and that was suggested, having a second session, after the RFP is released and applicants have had a chance, seeing if there was time, that would be a very good thing to maybe integrate in the new process. Second bullet point said it was a pretty good process and didn't have any recommended changes. The third was just talking about the scoring rubric and its arrival. But now that it's here, we can also provide some more information to help adjust, help applicants and existing grantees adjust as well. All right, so that's the end. Pausing here if there's any questions about the recap or the feedback from the 2022 applicants.
How many people was the survey sent to?
How many applicants?
All of them. So it's all 36 projects, but I think it was 20-something project organizations because some organizations have multiple partnership grant projects.
I had hoped to see a little feedback on whether there was anything they felt should be considered. Did we get any feedback on that?
All the responses that I presented was all that we received. So there weren't any other specific feedback as well from any of the applicants sent separately.
Okay.
The fact that there were only 6 that responded, does that tell us anything?
I mean, I will say that one of the applicants has 3 projects. So, I mean, we didn't want to overburden because survey fatigue is real too. So if you take that into consideration, I think there's several projects that had multiple projects. So it's 6 organizations. I didn't get the full project breakdown, unfortunately, sorry about that, but it would be a higher number if you consider the number of projects that.
Yeah, well, so 6 out of 20-something organizations responded. It's still not a very high percentage of responses. Does that tell us anything?
I mean, I think it's an indication that like just survey fatigue in general, and this was an optional thing for the applicants that we wanted to get feedback on, and I really tried to get them to be responsive, just because we do want to consider this in future iterations. Oh, Elizabeth raised her hand.
I was just going to address Justice Murray's question. We have, as Crystal's mentioned, we have been surveying our grantees quite a bit. With each codification issue, they are surveyed typically. And also during this time is the support center deeming process. And so we've been really heavily reminding grantees to respond to the deeming surveys. And so I think this one probably just wasn't prioritized for them because we have been surveying quite a bit.
Okay. I guess I was thinking that the lack of response could possibly mean that they're generally okay with the rubric, that if they really, were concerned about it or aspects of it, they would have responded.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate inference or a reasonable inference?
So, Dwan, did you want to say something before?
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing as you asked that, Justice Murray, that maybe the vast majority are satisfied. It seemed to be, there were maybe that one organization where, I don't know if it's the same organization that had issues on several of the questions, but maybe there might be one that wasn't as satisfied. And then there was more positives. And then maybe everybody else is just, it's fine, middle of the road. No issues.
I mean, I don't know, we should probably defer to a professional surveyor or statistician like Jim Meeker, but my takeaway is that it's, they didn't really care one way or the other. They didn't really love it. They didn't hate it, whatever, it's fine.
Okay, yeah. Generally okay with it.
And we did share the total rubric scores and their proposed tentative allocations, and the responses received is, I think that was where we really got the meat of the response. This is like, this was surveying their whole experience, which I think was satisfactory. Like that's what I would infer.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna say that this is a representative sample, then the not helpful at all might be more than just one person. Do we understand why they had such a difficult time and why the process and the application and the rubric was not helpful for them?
In terms of that applicant or the person who the applicant who responded as not helpful.
It seemed across the board, every response.
I will say, like, I believe that maybe that applicant probably didn't fare as well in the rubric process. But I think we did have processes in place to try for staff and the review teams to provide technical assistance to improve scores and to address deficiencies. And maybe there was a disconnect, and there's an opportunity to address that in future grant years. But I mean that was a very strong correlation just based on that one applicant's responses. I didn't necessarily tell the applicants that they would be like the responses would be public, so this is aggregated, and I think this is the safest way to maybe go about sharing the overall feedback, because I don't want to specify which applicants responded with what answers.
Right, but it is helpful to know that the one person in green was in fact one organization.
It seemed to be an outlier, but again, all of you pointed out it's a pretty small sample size. So
and the correlation was to the outcome, their outcome in the process.
Yes.
So that if other people had similar concerns related to their outcomes, we would have maybe heard from them. Is that a fair inference?
Yeah, I would say so.
Am I being too optimistic about this?
No, I would say so.
So I guess from staff, the key takeaways from the survey are, what would you say?
I would say it's a more interfacing. So maybe a second webinar with the applicants once they've kind of gone looked at the RFP and if they have follow-up questions, providing more technical assistance. And I think there's some categories that maybe could be better refined, but we've talked about this all together as a committee too. I think specifically maybe the selection criteria could be a little bit clearer as well, but not, I don't think there's anything actionable today, but we're gonna, of course, like combine this feedback with the committee's feedback from the June 18 meeting and revisit it. Okay.
Any further questions or comments? Okay. Thank you for that, Crystal. Okay, so we can move on to item 4C of the agenda.
Great. So this was something that we anticipated, but weren't and had planned some part of this meeting for. This is the proposed plan regarding the additional 2022 EF partnership grant funding. A little bit of background just about Senate Bill 129. So Governor Newsom signed the Budget Act of 2021 on July 12th, and this allocated an additional $4.34 million to the EF partnership grants. As stipulated in the act, the funding needs to be encumbered or spent by June 30th, 2023, and is subject to reporting requirements. Dwan, is that a new hand raised?
Yeah, I just want to make just one note. There was another version of the Budget Act that was signed right after this on July 19th. For partnership grants, it doesn't make any substantive difference, but there is another, I believe it's AB 164, but I can send it to you all so that Crystal can send it out, but it doesn't have a substantive change for partnership grants.
Got it. Great. So we've kind of tried to figure out how to address this. And so SABR staff met with Judicial Council staff, and we have a couple of recommendations for the committee's consideration. Hopefully
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a question about the legislation? Are there any, did the legislation include any priorities other than what we usually incorporate into our partnership grant funding, like rural projects or homeless? Well, I guess homelessness is a different issue, but are there any things that we're supposed to prioritize, or is it just the ordinary partnership grant process?
do you want to? Yeah,
just the ordinary grant, just a typical grant partnership grant process. There was no additional guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions before I proceed with maybe with the proposed plan?
This is Bonnie. The only other thing I think, and I'm sorry I didn't pick up on this earlier, is that we anticipate that next year this funding will be, it will have about an additional 1.5 million. It went from an increase of basically 45 million for the Trust Fund Commission to, we think, 15 million for the Trust Fund Commission. So just sort of, thinking about that this was really, and maybe, you never know, right? With the legislature, could be more, but just to have that framework as well.
Dwan?
And just one more thing to add. So there's no substantive change regarding the new bill that passed, but there is one addition, and it has to do with reporting requirements. With both EF, which includes partnership grants, the state bar is going to have to provide a report to the Judicial Council that then we'll have to remit it to the legislature. So this is a brand new requirement for all of us. And it's a January 1st report that has to go from the Judicial Council to the legislature. So just working backwards, partnership grants has done annual reports. We're probably going to need to be on a semi-annual reporting cycle so that we can have something to aggregate for the Judicial Council to then pass to the legislature. But again, there's no additional guidance in terms of criteria or preference or anything. That's just a reporting requirement.
Great. Okay, I will move on to the next slide again. Great. So there's so as I mentioned, SAPR staff and Judicial Council staff also met to develop a proposed plan for the committee's consideration. They're broken up into several categories, and I'll go over the plan in detail. At the end, we can talk at each point, but at the end, the goal is to make a recommendation for the Trust Fund Commission to consider at its August 13 meeting. So just starting off with some general recommendations. Our first one is that the partnership grant funding, which we've informally dubbed Partnership Grants 2.0, just not to confuse it with some other ones, is to that this grant be administered separately from the 2022 partnership grant applications that were just approved, that 2.58 million. Just because of the administration, we didn't want to delay this the 2022 batch as well, and then reopen it. We think it'd be too administratively difficult to try to pull off at the same time. Another general recommendation, because it is subject to the typical requirements, any applicants applying for this funding opportunity would be subject to the same threshold eligibility requirements listed below. The third bullet point for the committee's consideration is utilizing the same scoring rubric that was used for 2022, just given the time constraints, and to provide some sort of provide some continuity for returning applicants who may be familiar with the iteration of the rubric that was used in 2022. This may make more sense as I talk about some applicant options, but pausing here to see if there's any questions.
Justice Murray?
Sorry, I can't find my electronic hand here, but the bullets don't include the at or near the courthouse requirement. And I'm wondering, is that intentional? And not to be critical of that if it is. In fact, I think it might be a good thing if we can utilize technology for these grants.
Yeah, so just regarding the at or near courthouse component, so staff did research just in terms of the statutory requirements and some other policies. So the at or near the courthouse just seemed to be a component that was in the RFP, the former request for proposals. So it doesn't appear to be an actual requirement. I think the intent, as we talked with Bonnie and Melanie, of that at or near the courthouse was a true partnership between the state court as well as the QLSP, and that was one of the ways. Bonnie, feel free to chime in if I'm saying this if I'm misstating this, but I think that's kind of covered under the bullet point of the joint court and qualified legal services project requirement.
Yeah, this is more in the code, and so I think what we've over the years have gone to the at or near as a way to really say, yes, this is a partnership, not just the partnership isn't just legal aid, you do your thing, thank you, from the court. So yeah, and I think this year, given everything that we've learned about using technology, it seemed like, we have a lot of self-help centers that are operating with people who are, on phone and on video and a lot of other technologies. So it seemed like this would be a year to at least have people start thinking about doing that. And it also seemed like it might be a way also to address some of the rural concerns, because one of the challenges is just having attorneys drive all over to different courthouses, and particularly now when it may, there are going to be big safety issues in terms of that kind of personal contact. So that was the thought, that this might be the year, and that we would come up with, something that would be maybe even from the self-help center saying, yes, we've discussed it. Yes, we're integrating whatever it is, that even beyond maybe what the presiding judge does, to just make sure that that had really been thoroughly kind of scoped out. But that was the thought this year.
Thank you. I think that's a good thing. I think we learned quite a bit over this last year about how to be productive without being face-to-face.
So I'll move on to the next slide. If there's any questions, feel free to chime in, anyone. So the next one was regarding applicants and what their options would be. So we are proposing that applicants be provided two options, and these are both of them. The first one would be option 1, which is to apply for supplemental funding for an existing partnership grant project. Of those 36 that were approved just a few minutes ago, we think that this would provide an opportunity for grantees to improve their total rubric scores by addressing any application deficiencies. If the committee agrees with this option and applicants are interested in pursuing this, staff will provide the full breakdown instead of just the total one, and provide technical assistance to those applicants just regarding, where were they below expectations, and what areas should they address more specifically. And then if approved, we would be recommending a shorter grant period of April 22 to December 22nd. The thought was, since these projects are already slated to begin January 1st, this money would kind of come down the line during the course of that year. Some considerations under this option would be whether or not the committee would like to, potentially increase the funding range. I believe the largest ask amount for the 2022 slot, the 2022 stack was $150,000. I think the committee had chosen 120 just to, be able to give allocations in their recommendations. And then the second one was just regarding requesting supplemental funding that would put an applicant higher than its original ask amount. Our recommendation is maybe staff would work one-on-one with the applicants to determine whether or not option 1 or maybe option 2, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, of submitting a new project proposal would be most appropriate. Any questions about this option? Elizabeth?
Thanks. I just wanted to add that the idea with the supplemental application is not necessarily for the applicants to be, made whole, if they didn't get exactly what they asked for initially, but really just to see if, given that we may increase the funding range, given that this is additional funding, whether the applicants could, expand their projects or add a component that hadn't been contemplated before.
So I guess I'm kind of confused by this. Let's say I'm Riverside Legal Aid and they have this probate project and we gave them 70,000. So if they went with this option, would they be limited to the difference between 70,000 and 120,000?
I don't think so. Like if they were requesting 200,000 as well, like I would probably work with Elizabeth and also talk to Bonnie too, because I mean that's a larger amount than they've historically been granted, and we would raise that to the committee to say like historically this has been within the range. But I know that there were several category areas, example for that specific project that the committee had concerns with. So the thought was, maybe also address that as they submit this supplemental request.
I guess maybe I should look at option 2. Maybe we should just go on.
Yeah. I have a question about what Elizabeth just said. Why would it not be used to make them whole if they didn't get what they asked for? What's wrong with that?
May I respond?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's a great question. I think that could be an option. They could be made whole, but I think my sense, and I think staff's sense from the discussions that the committee has had, is that the committee scored the applications based on what they thought the quality was, and so it's not necessarily like automatically we have additional funding stream, you could be made whole just by submitting the same information. We would really want you to say like what's different or how address the deficiency in the supplemental application.
What if
so it's not just like I'm submitting a 2.0 application to be made whole. It's really staff working with the applicant to address the deficiency, or the applicant adding something to the application that's beyond what the committee has already reviewed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that, because none of them were really, one, right? They're all good programs. So I wouldn't want to force them to try to prove their, you know, that they're going to do something different to be made whole. But that's just my opinion.
But, and it's not that they must do something different. I think it's addressing the deficiency if there was one.
So what if they said,
Oh, we're gonna hire 2 paralegals now, and we're gonna show up in 2 more courts in Riverside, and we think we need 120,000 to do that or something, and we're gonna apply to, you know, so is that option 1? To do the same thing, to do the probate program. We're just gonna expand it. We're gonna meet 5 times a week now or whatever, you know, just something expansive. How does that fit into this proposed scheme?
I think in your example, Eric, that would be option 1.
Right.
We have a couple more hands raised. Maybe you can see what other, Dwan, I think Dwan, were you next?
I just want to respond to both Elizabeth and Christina's comment. It's not necessarily prohibiting them from making whole. If the committee thinks that had you known about this funding in the first round, you would have increased their funding.
Yeah.
I think the impetus is to fund quality projects and not to fund just because we have additional money. If this committee and the commission decides that at the end of the day there aren't enough projects to spend down the entire amount of the increase, then what will happen is that that money will get redistributed as through the formula, the IELTA-EF formula. So the money won't have to be returned to the state or won't have to be remitted to the state controller's office. So it's really about funding quality projects. So if you decide as a committee that to make whole is funding quality projects, then that's your prerogative.
Justice Murray, I don't know if you had a specific comment or were just agreeing with Dwan.
No, I think I was just agreeing, and maybe I should mute myself so you don't hear that.
And then did Will have your, did you have your hand raised? I think I saw it.
Yeah, I did. I think I will reserve my questions and response till after option 2.
Oh, sure.
Make sure I understand, get the big picture before I start commenting. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I'll just talk about option 2, which is pretty more, which is straightforward, but with just some recommendations. So option 2 would be for applicants to apply for a new project entirely. This grant period would be extended starting April 22, ending December 2023, so 21-month grant period. I don't believe I have this on. I think the next slide maybe might have captured a little bit more, but there were some additional considerations that I'll talk about here. You know, utilizing the same scoring rubric again, just for that continuity and consistency, because we had utilized it for 2022 and the time constraints. And then, you know, the discussion of whether carryovers would be permitted. This is a very long-term grant, This is a one-time funding for opportunity for applicants to submit larger scale grants or unique grants. And so I think the thought was, because we are anticipating, you know, 2023 funds as normal, the January 1 to December 31st threshold, that this, you know, that no carryovers be permitted for this for the new projects, because we wouldn't want it to necessarily be held in a reserve, I think maybe for their normal course of grants, but to really be intentional and create as much impact during this 21-month grant period. Let's see. I think my next slide had some considerations as well that maybe were more responsive to that 21-month period. One of them was, you know, suggesting a minimum grant request. Suggestion from staff was $75,000, which would be a potential to fund a 0.5 FTE, given the 21-month grant period, and then, you know, potentially increasing the funding range to $300,000. Again, considering, you know, how much longer this grant is than the typical partnership grant cycle. The bullet point below just talks about some targeted outreach and kind of where we're planning on starting this, because we do really will need a lot of applicants in the door and interested. So we're just seeking the different places where we would be able to kind of garner interest in this funding opportunity. So that was that was applicant or options 1 and 2, as well as some additional considerations. Pausing here to see if there's any questions or feedbacks thus far.
I have a quick question. on option 2, it said the grant period was till December 2023. I thought the funds were encumbered after July 2023. Am I confused? I mean, I am confused. I guess I want to understand how it actually works.
Go on.
I can speak to the encumbered language. So encumbrance is once the state bar and the judicial council execute the contract. So Bonnie and I are in the process of working that. So we would have satisfied that requirement encumbered.
Saying that we are authorized, like the projects are authorized under the current legislation to spend money through December 2023.
The legislation, I believe it says encumbered, or there was the other word, or expenditures through that date. So we're looking into it, but we believe that's fine, that they can spend it through the year.
Yeah. And this is probably my error in asking Crystal to clarify. But for example, with our contract, now the Judicial Council enters into the State Bar, the funding is, so all our funding starts on July 1, but the partnership grants start at the beginning of January. So it's that we pick up that additional 6 months. So I think I think we'll be fine on it. I just am concerned that we don't go, it doesn't go too far beyond that. But I mean, anyway, I'm sorry. I think it may be more of an issue for some of the formula grants as well. But it's a very interesting year, because we're on some levels, it's just this huge bump for this year, but there will be continuing. So it's kind of like we're looking for programs that can do a big jump up in 1 year, but may be able to continue on, which is where some of the remote services also may be, particularly important, or other funding that they can pick up in future years to maintain the projects.
I'll assume you guys can navigate that complexity, but let me go back to another one. I mean, if I'm a project, it's obviously a lot better to have the flexibility to spend through December 2023, right? So I'm going to try to, I don't want to use the word game this, but I'm going to try to structure my application so that I have a new project. And I wonder if we're going to be able to distinguish effectively between new projects and supplements to old existing projects. For example, in the Riverside legal aid situation, if I wanted to, I'm just using that because I'm thinking about it, I might want to try to describe, even if I'm essentially doing probate work, as described in the existing project, I may want to try to characterize the application as something new. Probate plus or something. We're going to provide different probate, something like that. I'm just wondering if that's going to be a problem, distinguishing between new projects and supplements to old ones, existing ones.
Well, so Eric, in that situation, wouldn't they have to terminate the old one?
No, because they're getting funding under the existing one, right?
Yes.
That, so they're going to get that funding.
Yes.
So they're not going to terminate it. So they're going to say, now we're going to do something new. We're going to do a new probate. We're going to do probate 2.0 or something, and this is going to be a whole new thing. And we're going to, I don't know, we're going to do something.
It's really the same thing that we're already funding?
Well, again, I may be creating a problem that doesn't really exist, but if I were a project, I'd be trying to figure out a way to do something new so I could have more time to spend the money.
Yeah.
Will, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I have a few questions, but I guess I'll start on the specific option 1. So what we're really talking about is they wouldn't have to resubmit. They would take their old application, and it would be people who had deficiencies or who lost out because they didn't have the high enough funding priority. So they weren't rural, they were in their 5th year, those sorts of things where it would be the kind of make whole. And they would be able to apply without doing a whole new application, just maybe updates or just raising their hand to say, hey, we weren't a funding priority, but now you have the funds. Can we get the additional money? And then the other side of that being the stretch goals. If they can identify specific ways that they want to expand their project, they would be able to do so. And the period would be April 2022 to December 2022. Is there some reason it would be not a full year?
Oh, it's because we were trying to build in the administration time, because this requires application build out and outreach as well. So my last slide here was the proposed timeline. So you can see, like, we do need a little bit of time to administer the additional funding. So because it would be
right on
supplemental.
the
Yeah.
back end, I guess. I mean, why wouldn't it be the full year on the back end? Going April to April as opposed to April to December.
Because it would be a supplemental for the 2022, we were thinking it would end with the 2022 grant year, because it would happen in the course, and then they're just incorporating the additional monies into that proposed project.
And it wouldn't then be spread out evenly over the 4 quarters. They would get quarter 1 based on the initial allocation, and then quarter 2, 3, and 4, they would get the higher funding level.
Yeah, I believe the payments are like kind of a one-time thing instead of quarterly. But Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah. So for the partnership grants that you all have just approved the recommendations for, those we would pay out. Partnership grants we pay out annually, and so those would go out January-ish is when we typically send those out. So those would go out as we have done in the past, and then based on the timeline that Crystal showed you just briefly, then the supplemental funds would go out as soon as possible, probably April, once the decisions were made and all the approvals were received.
Okay, so they would know that they would know pretty quickly that they were going to have the additional funds, and they could budget appropriately as if they had received it for the full year. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I have one other kind of big question, but I don't want to take up all the time if somebody else has something. All right, I'm gonna go for it. So I would like, I guess, hopefully, I'm going to ask you to divine what the legislature was thinking, where a big chunk of money for 1 year, for 1 year's worth of programs, and building a program, making the application, and then knowing that all that money won't be there in the future. Is that an accurate understanding of what option 2 would look like? They have to build a program, or it could be, I guess you said it could be a previously established program coming back to funding, but it seems strange to me that you just want to do 1 year's worth of funding, and that puts there's a lot of administrative burden in starting up a program and then not knowing where you're going to have year 2's funding come from. Am I missing anything?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think what we're saying is that we anticipate that there will be continuing at least an additional 1.5 continuing in funding, in addition to the 2.6 or whatever that we give out. So it isn't anticipated that this is only one-time funding, but any 1 year bump, which is what we're looking at this year, it's true across the board. It's true for our formula grant programs, right? What we're going to be giving out, what's the difference? I don't know, $40 million this year to programs, saying, yeah, well, you're getting 40 million this year, and it'll be about 30 some, a lot less next year, right? And that's, I mean, I think everybody, I'm assuming that the legislature is first of all thinking that this is a good budget year, and we want to get money out to legal aid, and they're assuming that there's going to be a lot of need resulting from the pandemic. And I think all of us hope that we'll be able to get more in the future, but this is going to be a challenge for legal services programs across the board, because the way legal services, I mean, it's all staff, right? That's, it's attorneys, it's paralegals, and across the board, yeah, we're asking people to hire up and hire a bunch of people with a 1 year, you know. So anyway, I think in some ways, I mean, it's one of the reasons that I think thinking about, gosh, if we are doing remote services, maybe there are some things that can be done with technology or, you know, something like that, so that the program, you know, there may be a bump in where there's funding needed to set that up, and that, you know, there's a way to maintain it. But it's a challenge. It's just going to be a challenge for all of us this year. There's 100 million more for legal services, but we anticipate that being cut down to 50 million more next year. So it's a big cut. It's a big bump. So let's look at the happy side.
So it's a good challenge to have.
Go on.
Pretty common that.
Yeah, I just want to also add to what Bonnie's saying. So we know it's the one-time bump for this year, but we've been told by the Department of Finance that next year we're also going to get an increase. It's not the 50 million increase, but a 20 million increase. So not quite as high. We're waiting to get clarification from the legislature of how much we can rely on that, and in terms of how we let programs know, in terms of how this committee and the commission will plan towards that. We've been told that, but the thing is, the way the state budget works, it's on a year cycle. So obviously it's not in the state budget now to reflect that. But Bonnie's, the Judicial Council as well as State Bar staff is trying to get some more clarification from the legislature in terms of that reliance. And as soon as we do, we'll report back to this committee, or perhaps the whole commission if we get it before then.
And I'll just say the other challenge is, of course, if we can't spend it, then it looks like, you know, then the message is you don't need the money for future years, right? So it becomes important to think through how to do this in a thoughtful way. But I think we want to demonstrate that absolutely there's a need, and that we're able to step up, and that, yeah, we're going to actually need more in the future. So that would be the hope.
I had a follow-up question, but I know Melanie was going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say that, you know, in the world of nonprofits, and I'll say self-help as well, it's pretty common for there to be ups and downs, and you know, it's an obnoxious problem whenever you're running one of those things, to know that you might hire this year and have to let people go in 2 years or something. But it's just a reality. I don't know if there's a solution to that. If there was, it would be fantastic. But it just makes it so hard, you know?
Can I ask a question about option one?
Yeah.
Yes, by the way, your presentation is taking up all of my screen, so I can't see who's raising hands, or I don't even see the hand raising function. So sorry to just jump in like this, but on option one, are we assuming that there are necessarily deficiencies to correct? Let's say, for example, we took the project that finished at the very top of our chart that had the highest rubric score for option one, and let's just say they wanted to do more of what they're currently doing. So they make an option one grant. If we approve this paradigm here, they make a grant under option one to double what they were proposing to do before, same project, and they want 150,000. I mean, is that something they could do?
I would say yes. Yeah. I mean, that's one consideration too. Like if they scored exceeds in multiple categories, hopefully the application would have some sort of mechanism for them to justify or describe why additional funding would be warranted beyond their request amount. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was kind of thinking, Eric, when I was making my comments before, is that most of them don't really have deficiencies. Some are better than others, and some score higher than others for completely different reasons. So I don't want to make the assumption that because they didn't get a 70 or whatever, that there are deficiencies that they need to address and make them do all this work when their project is just fine.
Yeah, I think they're both speaking about the funding priorities that lowered people just because they weren't as lowered them on the rubric just because they weren't a higher priority and we had less money. But had we had enough money to fund them, we would have fully funded them. If that's what everyone's saying, I'm fully on board for that.
Yeah, so I think when you describe this, assuming we approve this paradigm, I think this notion of providing an opportunity to improve deficiencies is a little bit confusing. I think it's just an opportunity to supplement their grant for their current project, and we'll score it based on the rubric.
I agree.
Okay.
Justice Murray?
Maybe the thing to do is communicate to them what Eric just said, but also explain to them that whether or not they get this supplemental funding may depend on whether or not they address the deficiencies in the previous application.
If any, right?
If any, correct.
Yeah, those are fair. We will we can make those updates as well. This specific language is not in the resolution. It's more of the administrative end as well. So we can communicate that to the applicants.
Yeah, I think some of them where it's just a funding priority, they just need to raise their hand and say, yes, we want the full amount. And we could look at it. On option 2, if I may ask, since this is Partnerships Grant 2.0 and kind of out of the regular cycle, would we be allowed, acknowledging that this is maybe a one-time big bump, there may be additional funding to help fill the gap, but would we be allowed to fund more technology? I think as the rules are written now, we pretty much say we don't want to cover capital costs very much, but is that something we could modify for this particular Partnership Grants 2.0 to let them fill in the technology holes that they may have identified over the past year and fund that along with any other programs they want to go for? What's our flexibility?
I think that's in the context of the proposal itself. If it's a remote or like majority remote model, the technology, that's budgeted for that might be larger than in past years. But if it makes sense to the model and still, meets the requirements, I think, project budget like determinations are like at the committee's discretion. But we can communicate that would be one area that there would be flexibility in if it does support the proposal with the goal of providing services to self-represented litigants.
Yeah, there was a $1,000 limit listed in the instructions. So
that's a good question because they probably wouldn't be booking that as an expense. They would be booking it as a capital investment and then expensing it over time. Is that going to be a problem? Because I was thinking that would be a great use of the money. But is that going to work?
Dawn, Elizabeth, just wondering if you had any insights about characterizing like the different technology as capital for partnership grants specifically. I don't know if there's any specific restrictions, but I will defer to either of you.
Or maybe we can just let them call it an expense, even though on their books it's not. But I don't know.
We have a really specific definitions of like capital improvements, like real estate improvements. I'm assuming you're not thinking that, but you're thinking there's a line for that I think that's
server.
I think that's all fine. There's those suggested percentages, the 75-25 between personnel and non-personnel. That they can deviate from that. They just have to make a pitch. And from what I'm hearing is you all want to be flexible with that. But I think at that point, Crystal would flag it for you if they deviate from those and have the recommendation that's for you to approve. So I don't see a problem.
Yeah, that flexibility sounds great to me because if they need webcams or laptops or servers or whatever it is, and they can apply that towards a program that for partnerships grants 2.0. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like we have that flexibility. So I would just want to make sure the applicants knew when they were going through the instructions that they had that flexibility to ask on this.
Yes.
And we could probably pull that out too, and maybe Crystal can highlight that. We're probably going to do a webinar or some type of informational meeting, just so they know that to be aware that they can budget for that.
I'm pulling up the calendar just for reference. So, today we're meeting today on the 29th. The Trust Fund Commission meets on August 13, and Judicial Council September 30th to October 1st. That would be kind of the approval time of this proposed plan. But September is when we would begin the initial outreach and kind of ramping up with the application build out. We'll have I think our meeting is November 4th. So the Partnership Grant Committee will review the RFP for the Partnership Grant 2.0, and hopefully we'll highlight all of those things that you all suggested today, with technology, et cetera, with a release date for the RFP in November, due December 17. Application review, as we're proposing, would be at the beginning of the year, January to February, and then we'll have the subsequent calibration sessions. One call out was just, 2023 will be happening as well. And we typically release that RFP also at the beginning of the year. So maybe we'll save it for the November meeting in terms of administration and application review in terms of what the committee is comfortable with, but it is going to be a lot of applications to review in an overlapping period. So we can determine, what sections you'd want staff to take a look at or whatnot in November. So we have a little bit of time to figure those logistics out. And then, April 1 to 2022 to December 2023 would be the grant period this is for the new grants. And Dawn had mentioned mid-year reporting just to be responsive to those reporting requirements. I forgot to add the April 21, 2022 to December 2022 for the supplemental option. Any questions about the calendar?
No, did anybody respond? I guess nobody's commented on whether we should use the same rubric for option 2. That was one of your questions. And to me, whether you love it or hate it, I think we have to do it. To me, we had one option being graded under a rubric and another option being graded by God knows what. That would be so confusing to me. I think for consistency, I think we have to do it. We have to use the same rubric.
Thanks for raising that. It's one of the bullet points in this very long resolution, but I just wanted to have you all take a look at to see if there's anything we given in light of our discussion, if we need to adjust before the committee considers it.
I just want to get some clarification. This wouldn't mean we'd have to redo each of the rubrics we'd already done. We would just be focusing on whether for this last grant cycle, we're not going to go through and review those again. We're just reviewing changes or whether the funding priority didn't allow us to give the full award or whether they have stretch goals, those sorts of things. It's not going to be a whole redo of the process. For
option 1?
Correct.
Yes.
Well,
You should have we'll probably provide the rubric scores, for the application submitted for reference, but you wouldn't be reviewing again to confirm selection criteria, but maybe revisiting the score if the applicant added supplemental information to maybe be able to be more responsive or, things like that.
But isn't it essentially a new application? We wouldn't review the old application, but again, if a project says, I want to do more of the same, and here's what I'm going to do, and here's my budget for doing more of the same, wouldn't we just go through and apply the same rubric that we did before, but do it afresh? We can bear in mind the grade we gave them before, but we wouldn't be bound by that. That's the way I see it. It's just a new application.
Oh, I did not see it that way, Eric. So I'm glad we were talking about it.
These are logistics. Oh, sorry, Will, go ahead.
I saw Justice Murray raise his hand.
Yeah, I think we should not be bound by that, and that should be communicated to them. And again, with also communicating that, you know, if there were things you think you can improve on in your application, you should do it, because that's going to enhance your opportunity for increased funding. So I think the idea ought to be to motivate them to put in the best application they can, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, what I did before was good enough to get X. So, and they should be reminded we are still appropriating this money to a group of folks. And so we have to make decisions about who gets the money relative to each of the applicants. So they're still in competition, right? I mean, some organization that ups their game compared to some organization that doesn't do anything different in terms of what they tell us or how their application is structured or presented, we got to reward the organization that upped their game, right?
Yeah.
In this round of funding. So I think they should not think they can just rest on their laurels, and we shouldn't. We should sort of look at these applications anew or fresh in relation to one another, if that makes sense.
I think that, yeah, we kind of have to do that, I think. I don't know how else you do it.
I guess I was imagining that we'd be looking at that first group, option 1 group first, and then separately looking at the option 2 group, but I think I misunderstood.
No, I think that's right. I think we would look at them separately, but for each option, they would have to submit for anything they want to compete in, option 1 or option 2. They have to submit a complete application, and we have to grade it.
So we would be regrading all of the programs that we had already graded for this year.
For anybody who wants to submit a supplemental application, yeah.
It seems like there are two different variations of option 1. We have the ones that didn't get the full funding that they originally asked for. And then we have what Eric's describing, an organization that wants more and they're going to expand their program. I think those certainly need to be regraded. I'm not so sure about the first category though.
But we have one pool of money for option 1. So we have to have some way of weighing all of the applicants for that pool. And so I think we have to grade everyone who wants more money under option 1. I think we have to just assign a new rubric score for all of them. That's the way I see it.
I guess I just wanted to pause first just to confirm like whether or not the committee was in favor of pursuing option 1. Like it's also an option to not offer the option 1 as well. Just we're not stuck with it. You know, we haven't voted on anything as well. There's a lot of nuances that come with option 1. And as we're talking about now, there's different ways this can branch out. So I just wanted to pause before we confirm some logistics that, you know, the committee was in favor of, you know, offering that option to the 2022 grantees. Just to note, if we did, you know, make them whole, you know, that total amount would be like 500,000 or so. So it's fairly small compared to the 4 million that we need to distribute. So
I think what Christina said about the 2 different categories, I'm definitely in favor of that first group. We didn't have the funding, and we pull up the spreadsheet and we fill in the numbers and we say, oh, this is what they asked for. Their application was substantively there. They had all the boxes checked. We just didn't have the money. I'm definitely in favor of that. The stretch goal, as I would call it, or the expanded program, seems like it could add a lot of administrative overhead. And so I'm more hesitant on that.
If we have the 2 options, are we going to have separate pools for each option, or are we just going to look at this as one $5 million pool that gets divvied up amongst all the applicants?
I believe it'll be considered the one pool of the 4.34, but you know, for different intentions, one to supplement and one to fund new projects. So.
Justice Murray?
If we're looking at these together as one pool, then sort of changes the funding priority dynamic, doesn't it?
In what sense? Sorry, if you can elaborate.
Well, are we giving a completely new project funding priority over an existing project that didn't get fully funded, but would have got fully funded had we had the money, or an existing project that would have asked for more money if they knew they could have received more money, but thought that they were, you know, they were going to be given decreased funding over time. So they didn't ask for everything. There's a little geometry to this, it seems to me, that we should probably consider. I don't know if we can figure all that out today, but.
I mean, Justice Mary, another consideration is that, you know, these continuing projects, there's a likelihood that they would probably apply for continued funding for the 2023 grant year as well. And, you know, would option one kind of complicate, because we do look at prior awards, grant awards allocated, would that complicate that process, deliberation process down the road?
Yeah.
What if we just went with one option? Just
option two, probably.
Well, yes, but so how would that work? So let's say somebody, again, who essentially wants to do more of the same, makes an application to get money to do more of the same, and we decide to award that project some money. Can they have till December? And they have till December 2023 to spend that whatever tranche we award under this RFP. Is that going to be confusing because they're going to have to spend what we awarded before by December of 2022, but the additional 50,000 or whatever we give them, they have another year to spend? I mean, is that administratively workable? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I would think, I would think so. I mean, and they may well be applying for funding next year as well. But I think we're going to have all kinds of things because of these overlapping grant years that will make, you know, some of these I think it's going to be challenging for the programs to keep track of it.
I mean, if that's workable, I don't know, maybe we should just do one option. Option two.
Well, is there a concern that then it'd be hard for us to spend down that 4.5 million?
So, you know, one of the, for additional considerations, you know, we would be suggesting a minimum funding range of 75,000 and a maximum of 300,000, just so we're getting unique and like larger scope projects. So like if we do get, I don't know what the math is, getting these projects out monies, you know, it is feasible. But in response to Eric's question about a project trying to expand, I'm just trying to gauge, like 75,000 is it's a significant amount than kind of our current pool. Like it would have to be a substantial change to be able to provide a proposal that that has this, you know, this minimum funding amount request. Justice Mary, sorry.
Yeah. Maybe we could think about dividing our pot into two subpots, with one pot being, I think you said, Crystal, 500,000 would get everybody up to what they requested for this year. Set aside 500,000 for potentially making that kind of award to organizations that apply for that. And then the rest of the pot would go to new programs.
I like that.
Good one.
And then if there was money left over in the $500,000 pot, that could go to the new programs as well.
But that would mean, Justice Murray, that the first pot would you could only operate within the confines of your prior bid.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then the new programs would include, although not new, an enhancement to the existing programs, like Eric has been talking about, like expanding, you know, your coverage or the number of days or the number of hours per day or those kinds of things. I don't know. I'm just throwing
Yeah.
out a suggestion for thought.
So we did something similar for the bank grants. And my suggestion is that I think a suggested range for each of the pots is helpful, but you don't want to pigeonhole yourself. So maybe you want to say between 500 and 7,000. But the risk of, if you're too prescriptive, then you're not going to have flexibility. But I do think kind of some starting point will help the committee move forward, and will give programs a sense too of the direction you're going in. But we did do something very similar with bank grants when we had different pots.
Yeah, that may be workable.
Yeah, I think our flexibility might need to be limited by what we already know is the maximum number, 500,000,
Right.
if that's the number. Hey, I have to jump off to another conference call now. So I'm going to be leaving you guys, and have a good rest of the meeting.
Thank you for your
Comments.
help.
Thanks. Thank you.
Oh, Will, go ahead.
So I think hearing everybody else's remarks, it makes a lot of sense to exclude like expanding the program from option 1 or the stretch goals. As soon as you add that component in, then you really do, as Eric mentioned, want to evaluate it using the rubric, and it kind of becomes a new application. So hearing that, I think the limiting it to what they ask for and trying to make them whole will keep the administrative side less stressful. It'll keep it down because we're just going through what we had. And maybe if there are deficiencies that they've addressed, that makes sense. And then otherwise, they just need to apply using option 2 anew. If that's my understanding of what you're saying, Eric, then I think that makes a lot of sense.
And I don't think we need 2 pots of money to do that. Because we know what the number is.
Sense to me as well. Is there concerns about doing it that way, or placing that limitation on option 1?
Tuan Elizabeth, I'm not sure, or Bonnie.
Sorry, what was the question again? Sorry.
Just if there were concerns about, instead of allowing them to ask for more money on option 1, we just say we're going to look at what our priorities are and try and make you whole if we deem it appropriate, looking at the rubric score and that whole process we did at the end for the previous grant allocations.
I mean, I think that sounds okay. I think, staff can work directly with the applicants to figure out like what's the appropriate application for them to complete.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the commission this committee has spent a lot of time reviewing, considering the applications, made determinations, had some understanding that this funding was coming, and, made, so, I mean, but I think that's that's sort of your call. If it can be fixed through the application, or if it's, a more fundamental issue, I think, staff can certainly work with the programs. But I know you all spend a lot of time really very, very carefully thinking about what the appropriate level is. So
I think that was my impression, is that we were limited. We didn't have enough money to fund everything we wanted to fund.
If we go this route, though, I think we're going to end up essentially having to re-review the prior applications. Because, again, thinking about Riverside, I'm like hyperventilating on Riverside today. So let's say they say, oh, we're going to correct the deficiency. We're now going to assign a paralegal to the project. And we want another $30,000. But we'd have to go back to the other application and say, wait a minute, that was part of your other application. That's not really correcting the deficiency. But in order to come to that conclusion, in other words, to evaluate any requests they make now intelligently, we're actually going to have to go back and look at what they did before.
And
I
so
We're
think-
talking about option one.
Yes.
Don't we just assume that they're not changing anything? Isn't that the idea? That they just didn't get the money because we didn't have it. And so it's an opportunity to request that difference. Right?
Well, except, but again, to use the Riverside example, if they say, oh, we're correcting the deficiency, we're adding the paralegal. We say, wait a minute, but you told Elizabeth and Christina
Yeah.
that you were going to have a paralegal with the 70,000. So don't
So
say.
is Riverside an outlier?
Yes.
Is the question for me? Because
Well,
They're
again,
different.
well, I don't know. I mean, I'm focusing on them because I'm thinking of them, but I guess I don't oppose this. We can go this route. I'm just saying I think necessarily we're going to end up having to look at the prior application to intelligently evaluate the new one as a practical matter.
And Eric, I think another another point of consideration, which maybe we can slate for a later meeting, is would it be helpful for staff to kind of take the lead on reviewing applicants under option one, so we can do the evaluation and elevate that to the committee, so the committee can maybe focus on the new applicants and not having to kind of go back and trace back to see where the nuances are and the differences are, and have staff summarize that and give our recommendations for the committee's consideration, just to make it a little bit easier, so you're not having like two hats at the same time. But that could be an option, just so to not like double the load, but to make it a little bit easier for the committee. That's a possibility as well.
Sure, that's fine. But you guys, you're taking on more homework for yourself as usual.
I think we're gonna have to know the background and understand where the differences are with these new proposals. But it possibly staff can take the lead in distinguishing that for the committee, so you don't have to review double the stack. That's 36 proposals, each of them granted. That's plus the new ones that are coming in the door. We acknowledge that that's a lot. That's a lot for review. So that's one way to kind of split the load, the workload.
Whoever thought that getting millions and millions of additional dollars was going to be so miserable?
It's good news at the end of the day. It's just administratively and figuring out a pretty solid plan is where it's a little complicated.
Well, so Christina, you're suggesting maybe we have these two concepts, option one, where you can basically try to remediate deficiencies, and option two, which is essentially a new application.
Yeah.
And you're suggesting we don't necessarily have to officially designate a pot, but we can have in mind, what the pot really is.
Yeah, because we have plenty of money to do option one. So you don't need to, I don't see a need to separate it.
All right.
And I want to clarify that on option one, the big advantage here is we can get it out the door more quickly because there's less administrative overhead. Otherwise, I don't know if there's a huge gain. Is that a true understanding?
I think both options would be dispersed around April of 2022. So I don't know if it's more quickly, but it would be kind of folded into the 2022 project that began in January.
But a reminder that what you've already, the recommendations you've already approved for 2022, those we plan to get out in January.
Mm-hmm.
And staff feels the additional and administrative work required for option one is worth it rather than just choosing option two? Is that the consensus?
I don't think
Get
staff
more
has
money out.
We don't have a preference. It's just we want it to be as flexible. And so if the committee felt strongly about just using option two, we did want to acknowledge that we didn't fully fund everyone in 2022. If there's an option, here's a proposed plan. Again, deferring to the committee as to what you think would be best, but administratively, I think we're prepared to do both or one. So it's really up to the committee.
How many projects were not fully funded? Do you know?
I don't have that.
Okay.
I mean, if it's 36 and maybe not even three were fully funded because we had a max cap of the 120. So I would say a good chunk of them didn't
Oh,
really
that's right.
receive all of the requested amount. Mhm.
So can I just clarify, does this include the program that wasn't funded at all?
But I believe all of the projects were funded for 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that the person who said we didn't get a grant, the person who was the respondent,
The green one?
the green one?
I think that person was maybe just like not satisfied with the administration process, but they did receive a allocation. It's just lower than they had requested.
Okay.
I guess hearing that it's not going to be a substantially different and might add a lot of administrative overhead, not just for its staff, but for the committee, I guess I'm leaning more towards just option 2, just to simplify it. But
And you're withholding money. I mean, not as much money will get out.
yeah, that is the concern, I guess. Yeah, okay. I think that's the best argument.
Why is that? Why is that? I'm not following what you just said.
Because they won't have the opportunity to apply for that difference if they weren't fully funded.
They'd have to apply with a new program. They couldn't apply.
Oh, so
with,
you're
like,
saying
an
if we just
extension.
go with option 2, it has to be a totally new program?
Yes. And
Or
Well,
I thought we were going to do it as a supplement to the existing.
right.
program.
They could also supplement their existing program, and that would have, right?
For option 2.
Yeah.
Well, option 1 is the one with the supplement opportunity.
Right.
Right, because
if
then
they
because if they're complete, if we just go with option 2 and it's for new new projects, they're completing their entire application again. And so we are trying to make it a little bit easier for those who've already submitted their 2022 applications and have received a tentative funding recommendation that we're just going to have like a supplement. So just very specific questions about what additional services or what they're proposing to do with, the funds. And not complete the entire application that you all have already reviewed and approved.
But I'm sorry, if I heard the discussion being that we're just making them whole, not expanding.
That's option 1.
Yeah, so
Right.
a project that wants to do 2 things, correct deficiencies and expand, would they submit 2 applications? One under option 1, one under option 2?
Yes.
If the committee does proceed with option 1 and restrict the applicants from requesting more than their original grant amount, I would say possibly, for pursuing option 2. So they would do two applications in that case. But the changes I think would have to be fairly substantive for option 2 because it would be considered, like new funding. So I mean that could be a new staff position that would cover additional courthouses or whatever additional considerations that are much different that would warrant, that recommended minimum grant award of 75,000 or requested amount of 75,000.
Yeah, I feel like it's a cleaner option to just say, we will make you whole based on your request if we go with option 1. And any new extension, supplements, expansion, stretch goal would require option 2 application. That's my feeling at the moment.
I'm going to advance the slide a little bit just to look at the resolution. The resolution language is not as specific because it just highlights like the main points, but I will be drafting a memo to capture this committee's discussion, specifying those nuances if that's what the committee is in favor of.
So if we were to go with what I described as a cleaner option, it would remove the allow applicants to apply for supplemental funding for an existing grant. It would just be applied for their previously requested amount. Would that be accurate?
Well, it is supplemental funding, but it's limited to.
Oh, you're correct.
Right, limited to.
Okay.
You don't have anything in these bullets about the rubric.
It's bullet 3.
Utilize the same 2022.
Oh,
partnership
sorry.
grant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I apologize. I didn't see that.
A lot of bullet points, so.
Well, I mean, this resolution is, when you say incorporate the additional considerations, what does that mean?
That is regarding the suggestions for the, the 75 to the 300,000, which would be in the RFP. But maybe it's confusing as well, because I think that was the only main additional consideration. And we can delete that line.
Yeah.
Is that too vague? Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, I mean, the resolution as it's framed is kind of broad enough to give us flexibility to keep working this, frankly. I mean, so
I think
I'm okay with it.
I am as well, as long as Eric's concerned about the program expansion is taken into account. We don't want to make that the 2022 grant allocations messy. I think it should be new applications if they want to expand.
I mean, I think personally, I think the resolution is fine, but what I am concerned that the more we talk about this, this is kind of a complex process, I think. Are we going to have another opportunity as a group to kind of just talk through some of these things before we actually release whatever we're going to release?
Yeah, so in the timeline here in November, that's when we would have the RFP prepared, I think for the committee's review and consideration, and hopefully would kind of outline these, the nuances with Partnership Grant 2.0 and the restrictions and, recommended funding ranges, et cetera. So I think that's the next time, but Elizabeth, I don't know if there's another opportunity, because we do want to get this, elevated for the committee and then Judicial Council as well, and later this year.
Yeah, the opportunity
So just
seems fine.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify that at the top of the timeline here, July through October. So for the August 13th commission meeting, Crystal's preparing a memo on behalf of the committee to propose this distribution plan. So I think it will be these broad strokes for the commission's approval, and then the Judicial Council will also review and consider the distribution plan at their meeting at the end of September or beginning of October. So the broad strokes, yes, I think we need to decide today, but kind of the more specific details, we'll have another opportunity to discuss. We will have to schedule another meeting. Typically the committees don't approve the actual RFP, they just approve the concepts. But we will have another opportunity later.
Sounds great to me, and I am going to have to leave early for the meeting, so if we're in a position to make this motion, I'll be glad to make it.
Great, thank you, Will.
I'll second.
Okay, Eric, is there any further discussion before we vote? Okay, Crystal, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Vanarelli?
Yes.
Bartleson? Michelli?
Yes.
Biskin?
Yes.
Schreiber?
Yes.
All right, motion passes.
Thank you. Well, that's the last item on our agenda. Does anybody have anything further that they'd like to discuss before we adjourn?
I went back and looked at the allocations, and there are some that are just very little difference between what was asked for and what was approved. And so it would seem like maybe we don't, you know, again, in terms of thinking about how to do that, that you give staff authority to say, sure, you can get the additional $2,000 without submitting a supplemental application, and that the focus is on those that are, you know, was a substantive point difference in challenge. But I don't think you need to do that in the resolution. I'm just kind of pointing out. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Anything else?
There are a fair amount in that category that are.
And then they should just get it.
Well,
because it's $2,000.
I mean, but anyway, but at least, I mean, the staff may be able to just.
But they would have to submit something, right? To justify getting more money? Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't know if it has to be a big, you know, a whole new, anyway, you could sort of think through what that process would be. It's just for $2,000, it may not be worth a big process.
Right.
All right, anything further? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Crystal, Erica, Dawn, Elizabeth, for all of your great work. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. See somebody tomorrow.
I thought that went well.
Yeah, I mean, the option one is tricky, and I think maybe setting those parameters will be helpful and just a little cleaner than, you know, trying to be as expansive.
I don't think it has to be tricky. I think it can be really simplified.
Yeah.
Like what Bonnie said, give them their $2,000. That's the only reason we shaved them, because we didn't have enough money. That's obvious, right?
I'm hoping. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Christina.
Most of them. We would have funded all of them if we could have.
I'm hopeful that the committee would be open for staff to offer some suggestions or maybe tackle that end, because I think it'll be hopefully pretty straightforward.
Just delegate the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean,
or do the recommendation, and we're just like, yeah, because not. I don't. Oh, one thing I was going to mention. I don't like the terminology deficiencies or.
I know.
Justice Murray said it very well, actually. Oh gosh, and I should have written it down. He phrased it as an opportunity to improve your application. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a better, I mean, I also felt that way, but I couldn't think of a alternative phrasing, but I'll look at the transcript too to see what he put after this meeting.
Yeah, because there really aren't any deficiencies is just too strong of a word. I think we won't